The Bulls of Retribution are a loyalist successor chapter descended from the lineage of the stoic and proud Imperial Fists, raised in the 38th millennium during an unknown founding. Long has the Imperium been beset by enemies both within and without. Since the crippling of the Emperor and the death of the arch-traitor Horus, the Imperium has seen no end to the conflict that embroils the galaxy. On a million worlds and a billion battlefronts, the Imperium is pressed both within and without by those who desire nothing more than to finally bring about an end to the rotting, bloated carcass that is the Imperium. Hungry alien eyes gazing from the darkness as the domain of man takes its final, labored breaths. Yet, mankind does not intend to go quietly into the oblivion that awaits. On every battlefront across the stars, the Astra Militarum deploy men beyond counting, tides of humanity so thick as to reach the horizon, thrown as bloody grits into the mill of war. Yet wherever the fighting is thickest, wherever the need is the most dire, there you may find the warriors that truly exemplify the fighting spirit of mankind. There you may find the Space Marines. Located deep within the depths of the Imperium Nihilis, on the very edge of the Astronomican's former limits, there exists a chapter who has fought and bled for the Imperium for over 4,000 years, each day of their existence mired in the blood of their enemies. To be a Space Marine is to be an exemplar of humanity, one of the finest warriors in the species' history, born to fight and die upon the external battlefields of mankind with all the fury and violence of that race. The Bulls of Retribution embraced this existence, for violence and conflict ran deep through their veins long before the Imperium declared their ancestors to be worthy of apotheosis. Theirs is a brief history, yet nonetheless bloody for it, for every day has seen the chapter wage war upon the enemies of man with unremitting violence. In this dark age, chaos swirls around, corrupting the minds of men and seeking always to bend the future to come to their wills. In such a time, the need of the Imperium for heroes is dire, and in the benighted darkness of Imperium Nihilis is that place where the light of the Emperor is no longer to be found. The Bulls of Retribution tend and keep the flame of the Imperium alive, raging against the darkness around them, even as it encroaches ever closer. In the tides of war to come, none may gainsay who will survive, if any. Yet, it is all the more for the reason now that I lay down these records, to preserve, in some small part, an ember of the spirit of man from the coming darkness. For none but the Master of mankind know the destiny of the human race, and upon his golden throne the Imperator Mortifex speaks not. The first entry pertaining to the Bulls of Retribution within the Imperial Archives was created in approximately Chronos segment 025M38, long before the actual creation of the organization, with the record itself referring to a conflict upon the future chapter's homeworld of Gudan. If the records are to be considered accurate, a true rarity in the era of chaos, although the machine spirit of Chronogitator is quite adamant as to their accuracy, those individuals who would found the chapter were originally the leaders of a vicious gang known as the Horns of Gudan, which, as a major political player on their homeworld, was in control of vast regions of territory and valuable resources. If local legends are to be believed, the chapter was founded after a long and brutal campaign, now forgotten to history, which was waged throughout the sector. During this campaign, it is said, the Imperial Fists fought the traitor legion of the Night Lords, and the fighting was brutal in the extreme. Many worlds throughout the sector were put to the torch, and untold billions slaughtered in the name of the Dark Gods. When the Imperial Fists attempted to respond to a traitor invasion of Gudan, they found upon planetfall that they were not the only humans fighting to defend the populace of that world. The Horns of Gudan, though only a loose coalition of tribes and hive gangs, had risen in force against the traitor invaders, casting aside their petty gang wars and turf disputes to instead rally against the warp horrors that encroached upon their home. So successful was this defensive action that the Night Lords had been unable to breach the inner defenses of the capital Hive Vaxillion, and the vast majority of the populace there had been saved from the fates worse than death. The Sons of Dawn held these humans in high regard, for they'd fought against heretic Astartes of the ruinous powers with nothing more than blood, autoguns and steel, and against all the odds had succeeded. Following the war, the Imperial Fists made Gudaan into a recruiting world, building a chapter keep at the pinnacle of the highest spire of the planet's greatest hive city, Hive Vaxillion. By 564 M38, the region had become stabilized enough that the High Lords of Terra deemed a new founding was required to defend the burgeoning sector, and Imperial Fists knew just the world and just the gang suitable for the task. The transformation of a loose coalition of vicious hivegangers into what would one day become a full-fledged chapter of Space Marines was a task considered almost ludicrous by the High Lords of Terror, who deemed that such lowlifes were surely not worthy of the Emperor's most precious gift to mankind. Though there is no official documentation of what happened next, legend has it that upon hearing such a slight to those the chapter had personally praised, the captain of the 4th Company, stationed upon Holy Terror, became greatly angered and promptly made his disagreement with the High Lord's ruling personally known, while they sat in chambers, for though by imperial decree only the High Lords might decide upon those who shall be beneficiaries of the Emperor's gene seed, very rarely does the chapter directly put forward a specific group of baseline humans as candidates, and for such a candidacy to be rejected in so insulting a manner roused the famed fury of the Imperial Fists to no end. So it was that the Horns of Gudaan were selected to become the first members of the Bulls of Retribution, the chaplains of the Imperial Fists selecting only the strongest and most cunning of their number to be reforged by the apothecary's gene science into true Adeptus Astartes. Over a century later, and gifting to the Bulls of Retribution the chapter keep atop Hive Vaxillion, the Imperial Fists departed the sector, leaving the newly marshalled Bulls of Retribution to begin their watch. Almost instantly the chapter was required to make great deployments of Marines. Such was the nature of living on the outermost limits of the Astronomican's light, yet they did not turn from their duties, and for the next 4 millennia waged unending war in the God Emperor's name. The next preserved record of the Bull's actions was logged by the infamous archivist Uriah the Singed in Chrono Segment 002 M39, stating that Gudaan was besieged by the Night Lord's traitor legion, who launched a vicious and brutal campaign of destruction, terror and carnage upon the populace. Rallying the PDF forces of the planet, the then Chapter Master Arcturus led an inspired counter-assault that saw the Night Lords rooted on several vital and strategically important fronts, culminating in the Battle of Starport Vexilius, where the traitors to the Golden Throne had established their base of operations and sought to flee back into orbit. Knowing that time was of the essence, and that if the foe were to escape, other worlds would suffer as Gudaan had, Arcturus led a charge straight up to the center of the enemy line, using the wrath of the Gudaan Bull itself to rend and gore his way through the great enemy, before, in a feat of superhuman strength, he seized the head of the arch-traitor warlord in his gauntleted hands and ripped his skull from his body, spine and viscera flying in all directions. Seeing their lord butchered so brutally, the Night Lords were routed. In Chrono Segment 763 M39, the Bulls of Retribution were dispatched upon the request of the Imperial Fists to reclaim an ancient relic of the chapter, the Reliquary of Dawn, lost to it for millennium upon the planet of Mercenis 17 within the Gudaan sector. A fiefdom planet of the Adeptus Mechanicus, Mercenis 17 had been the location of a bitter battle between a contingent of Imperial Fists and Night Lords during the Horus Heresy, and legend held that Dawn himself had strode the planet in that distant age. Descending into the cave networks that riddled the planet's crust, Chapter Master Arcturus led his battle brothers deeper and deeper into the darkness, searching every nook and cranny they could find for the relic. However, it wasn't until they stumbled upon an enormous, pitch-black cavern that the bulls found their target, resting amidst the remains of a Crusade-era stasis field. Yet, no sooner had they begun to move the reliquary from its resting place before the bulls were assailed with the screams of the Night Lord's heretic marines, who launched a savage ambush. As the fighting raged, Arcturus realized these Night Lords were the same as those who had besieged Gudaan a near millennium earlier, and felt fierce hatred rise within him. Raising his power axe high, Arcturus roared the battle cry of the Bulls of Retribution before lowering his horned helm and charging into the fray, goring his enemies left and right. The melee was lightning fast, and in what seemed an instant, the Chapter Master locked his axe with the blade of the traitor warlord who led the Chaos Astartes. The Night Lord made for a quick-witted and barbaric opponent, nearly gutting Arcturus with his twin lightning claws, sparks flying as they sheared the tactical armor he wore and sent the Chapter Master to his knees. Yet, before the darkness could seize him and his strength fled, Arcturus let out a deafening roar of the Gudaan bull and leapt forward with one last surge of might, goring through the baroque battle plate of the Chaos Lord to skewer into his two hearts on lances of ivory. With a wordless scream, Arcturus rose to full height, the traitor lord sinking ever deeper onto his horns before the Chapter Master tossed the Chaos Astartes aside with the mere flick of his neck. Seeing their lord's vitae flowing from his gaping wounds, the Night Lords felt terror race up their spines as Arcturus rallied his men and led a charge into the surviving Night Lords. The traitors turned tail and fled, and the Reliquary of Dawn was secured. Yet, it came at a high price. Chapter Master Arcturus did not survive long enough to return to the surface alive, but his body was borne with greatest solemnity back to Gudaan, to be buried there with full honors alongside the greatest heroes of the chapter. Upon receipt of the reliquary and hearing of the valor of Arcturus, it is declared by the Imperial Fists that his name shall be entered into the Annals of Dawn, the chapter's record of only the greatest sons of Dawn. To the Bulls of Retribution, there is no higher honor. After the passing of Arcturus into legend, the Bulls of Retribution spent the next millennia persecuting vicious conflicts against the Night Lords, driving them from the sector and re-establishing the chapter's supremacy within the Gudaan sector. Many decades pass with almost no confirmed sightings of the Night Lords before 771 M40. During this time, a garbled psychic message from beyond the light of the Astronomicon was intercepted by the astropathic choir based upon Gudaan. As to the contents of the latter, we cannot say, but records state that upon the instant of reception, a full third of the choir collapsed in maddening death throes, and a psychic stream of utter horror tore through their minds. Only Chapter Master Galrov and his innermost circle of Astartes are privy to the message's contents, yet before the information is released to the wider chapter, Galrov takes 3 companies of Bulls of Retribution and sets course into the darkness beyond the Emperor's light. The Chapter Master maintains psychic communications with Gudaan for several chrono segments before simply disappearing into the void without a trace. The fleet's final message making vague references to stars that bleed and writhing worms beneath the flesh. From the bizarre and most certainly horrifying incident onwards, there is scant information regarding the deployment of the chapter's Astartes and their disposition. Indeed, following the disappearance of Chapter Master Galrov, the Bulls of Retribution see no further entries into the Imperial archives for nearly a millennium, their activities during this time of darkness known only to the current Chapter Master, Ilyanis. Indeed, it is not until 863 M41 that reference is made once again to the chapter, though in this record they are mentioned only in passing. Approximately 1 century earlier from the date of entry, the Space Hulk designated Writhing Worm had been sighted breaking into real space in the Gudan sector for the first time. Previously, the Hulk had followed a seemingly erratic path through reality, slipping into and being let loose from the Immaterium in locations and times without rhyme or reason. Indeed, whilst attempting to access the Autoxenos reports on the Hulk, I have found references to it as early as M32, with possible inferences to the self-same ship in records that are older still, yet too decayed for precise confirmation. Yet, though for all its previous life it had been a capricious wreck, once it dropped into real space within the Gudan sector, Writhing Worm began a direct and powered course towards Gudan itself, filling the void with the electromagnetic and psychic disturbances as it approached the system's Lagrange point, causing those void-going ships who encountered the emissions to become stricken with the horrific disease known as Gellerpox. It is not until Writhing Worm arrives at the outermost point of the Gudan system that the terror of what awaits within the Space Hulk is revealed. Broadcasting upon all Vox channels and noospheric links, the citizens of Gudan were met with the visage of a horrifically mutated beast, one whose flesh seemed to have run like a tallow wax. Only to the Bulls of Retribution is the identity of this sickly creature known. It is the Bull's former chapter master, Galrov. Almost as soon as the recognition of the disturbed visage crossed the mind of Chapter Master Koryolov, who had been appointed to lead the Bulls of Retribution only a handful of decades earlier, the Chapter Master took swift and decisive action. Placing a ban upon all civilian void travel within the system to contain the Gellerpox Writhing Worm carried with her, Koryolov summoned all combat-capable void ships to high orbit above Gudan before breaking for the system's edge, seeking to intercept and destroy the Hulk with cyclonic weaponry before it can pierce into the heart of the system. The initial approach began with ill manner, as those vessels crewed by the Imperial Navy suffered mass onset of Gellerpox, the baseline humans who crewed the vessel too weak in mind and body to bear the warp's corrupting influence. According to the chronicles stored in the Vault of Terror, the entrance trial of the Bulls of Retribution is a simple, singular task, yet one that is no less dangerous for its simplicity. Aspirants who wish to join the chapter must venture into the wilds beyond the few equatorial hives, out into the harsh, waterless barrens of the world's mesas and plateaus to hunt and kill a Gudan bull, a fierce and wild beast said to be distantly descended from Terran livestock brought by the original Golden Age settlers. It is no simple task, for the creatures are greatly altered from the original animals brought from Terra and are famed planet-wide for their ability to gore open even the armored slabs of a Lehman Ross main battle tank. The aspirants need only kill the beast and return with its head to the chapter's chapter keep. It is a task few succeed in.